Hi,
Hi,
Jessica.
how
How are
are
you?
you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing good.
Oh,
Happy
good.
Saturday.
Yeah, yes, it's same to you.
Yes.
You have any exciting plans for the rest of the day?
Cleaning my house. It's a
All
mess
right.
from the week.
That's that's pretty exciting. Well, I hope our time together at least ranks higher than cleaning the house.
Well,
We'll wait and see. I guess we'll find out. You
yes.
know. Well, that's the unnecessary or the necessary evil, I guess. House cleaning.
Especially with a 5-year-old. He's very
Oh,
messy.
Oh yes, yeah, they're like balls of energy. They just go like, boy, I wish I could have some of that.
Right.
Yeah, this is good. Yeah. Well, do you have any questions for me at all before we begin, or would you like to go ahead and get going?
Yeah, whatever.
Okay, I like that. Just kind of easy going. That's how the show is. It's just kind of laid back. We're just having a conversation.
Got my coffee. I'm good to go.
Excellent, fantastic, wonderful. Well, I'll do my intro and then we'll get the ball rolling. Hey, this is Mark Justice, and welcome back to Between the Lines. Today we have young adult fantasy writer Jessica R. LeMore. Jessica, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Um, I'm really excited to talk with you about your fantasy genre and your writing, because th- that's a particular aspect of fantasy that I've never really read. I have. I mean, I'm editing a book now for someone who's writing a YA fantasy, but I don't know much about the genre. So I'm excited to learn like the difference between YA fantasy and fantasy. So I'm kind of excited. So today is going to be educational for me. Well, let's just kind of start back. I like to kind of start with the big picture items, and let's go back to like your childhood and growing up. Who were some of your favorite writers, and what were some of your favorite books as you remember growing up?
Yes, so I really loved the Babysitters Club. That was one of my favorite series growing up. I had pretty much all of them. I really liked Christopher Pike's books. They were called Spooksville. So I think that's probably where a lot of my YA fantasy, like my love for it stems from. Um, because that was like my really probably first introduction, that and Goosebumps. I mean, who doesn't love Goosebumps?
Right. Yeah, I enjoyed reading those. They're kind of fun. And I even like the TV show, the series that was on the small shorts, the movies.
Yeah,
And yeah, they were kind of entertaining. I'm like, oh, okay. This one like took place at a fair. There was a haunted house, and
yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, I'm kind of digging this. So I mean, it's not skewered for my demographic, but I found it still very entertaining. You know.
Yes. Yeah. So, and The Lord of the Rings, of course, I always heard that, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Yeah. So I've always been drawn to fantasy and YA fantasy specifically. Even now, like I still read that genre. I love it.
Okay, well that's good. I think those early formational years where we're reading the kinds of things we tend to read when we're young that impress us are the ones that kind of stick with us,
Yep.
through our lives. And I remember, I mean, I could read before I went to kindergarten, so it was just read to from the womb, and that was like one of the greatest gifts I was ever given, I think, as a child, the
Mhm.
ability to read, and then just the encouraging to read and continue reading. And I remember still to this day, I must have been like 7 or 8 years old. For Christmas, I got like a 6 or 8 pack of novels, and they were a lot of H.G. Wells, War of the Worlds, Food of the Gods, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, things like that were all in this like pack of horror novels. And that's what I was reading as a kid, just voracious, like anything I could read. And that's just kind of stuck with me. I mean, reading
Yep.
is like an ultimate escape,
It
you
is.
know?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Always reading.
Yeah. So what is it about the fantasy genre that attracted you to it that you can remember? Like what specifically about that genre?
I think you had touched on it. It is the escape. It's really, you can go to a whole different world if you want to. You can live a whole different life. You can meet all different people. Um, yeah, people that are nothing like you, even. I think I've always been drawn to that.
Okay. It makes sense.
Yeah.
That where else are you gonna go and learn about hobbits and dwarfs and or just all kinds of other creatures, and because it's different than folklore. When you learn about folklore and like vampires and
Yeah.
werewolves, like that we get from the European folklore, it doesn't come off as like stories. This is like, here's folk tales. So it's kind of different when it gets put into a fiction piece. There's something that
Mhm.
happens, even though a lot of this folklore has been borrowed and brought up. It's still different when you hear and see specific, like we put names on faces and you hear them talking.
And you're more following like the main character in their journey. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, that makes perfect sense. So what drew you or made you want to start writing?
Ooh, so I've been writing for a while now. I really didn't get into it until I was in college. It's about 18 years ago, my brother passed away from a car accident. And it was such like a dark time for me. And I just remember I just started to write just random things. And it really just got me through like a really dark place.
Mhm,
And as the years went, I would always kind of revisit it. The same story would always come back to me. Like just could not escape it.
mhm.
And it's the first book of my series, The Princess of the Rebellion. Lana, the main character, I feel like she's just always been with me, and I would put the story away and just kind of go on with life and kind of forget about it. But she was always kind of in the back of my head, like, you just got to write the story, just write it, just write it. And so on and off the past 17 years, I've been kind of working on it. And something 2020 hit, and I don't know what it was. It was prior to the pandemic. It was like bright in January. I'm like, maybe I should try to do something with this because I had the first book done. Um, and I just decided to look for an editor, worked with a couple great editors, and just decided to put it out there. I think my husband was a big kind of proponent for it. Just put it out there. Like, you have it. Why don't you? People will
Mhm.
read it if they want to. If they like it, great. If they don't, oh well, they'll find something else.
Right.
So
Yeah. Because
yeah,
there's something uniquely personally satisfying about just doing the work,
yes,
and completing it and having
yes.
it done. Yeah. And I find, did you find the process of writing cathartic and healing? I mean, during this dark time, obviously just being able to deal with your emotions and your thoughts in a way is like the best kind of therapy, I find.
Yes, 100%. It was kind of my escape for a bit. I didn't have to be the girl whose brother just died. I could be whoever I wanted.
Mhm.
Um, it really got, just writing in general got me through one of the darkest periods of my life.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, I totally understand where you're coming from.
Mhm.
My first two books were kind of written through my darkest time, dealing with deep depression, like, really horrible stuff. And being able to write about that through other characters made made it a very cathartic process. I was able to kind of deal with it, express those emotions in a way, and
Yeah,
also understanding them in a way that was almost different than just experience feeling it.
yeah, mhm.
Yeah. You see it on a page, and it's like you are processing as you go. You're just processing. And when it turns out to kind of work in the context of a story, that's even better, especially when, like, if no one else knows that these are your thoughts, it almost is, this all seems like it's fiction, in
Yes.
a way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny. Like when I go back and I really think about my first book, I see like a parallel between what I was going through and what my main character was going through.
Hmm.
My main character, she finds herself in this whole new world. And at the same time, she's mourning the loss of her previous life while trying to adjust to her new life. And really, I mean, that was me. I found myself in a new world without my brother and just learning to kind of navigate that while also, mourning him and mourning what our family looked like prior to that.
Sure.
It's funny, like I picked up on that not long ago. Like for as long as I've been working on the book, I hadn't even thought about it.
Hmm. Did that make you appreciate the book differently than what you had before?
Yeah, that book holds a special place in my heart. I feel like I've learned so much from writing that book, and I'm on my third book now. The first two books are out. The third book of mine is with my editor. Um, and I see stuff that I could have changed But really, like that book, just even as it is now, it just holds a really special place in my heart.
Sure. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
because of the emotional connection. You can't
Yes.
you can't sever that.
Yep.
There's, even though it may not be perfect for you in that regard, there's
Yep.
the purity of it, the connection to your heart. That's what makes it good for you.
Yes.
You know, right? Yes, I completely understand that. You can work, and as you move on, once you've processed those emotions, it's not that they go away, but
Yep.
you deal with them better, and you come to a healthier place. And
Yes.
then the art or your craft of writing prose can kind of take over and become stronger. I mean, you become more confident in your writing ability, after you deal with the emotional, kind of toll, whatever you're dealing with. Once that's dealt with, then you can take a breath and it comes off your shoulders, and like, okay, now we can just move on.
Yep.
Does that ring a bell at all?
100%. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. No, I get it. The way you feel about your first book is how I feel about my second. It's a splatter Western, and it was processing not necessarily depression, but anger, through as a result of what caused the depression. And just, but I was also, but it was also in a very dark place anyway. And I love revenge. It's the purest, I think, story, of all time. That's kind of why God made hell, right? If you believe that. Uh, and but that was, that book, even though it may not be perfect, was like the first time I remember letting go of any qualms about what I wrote, what was on the page, just push and let my complete id come out for the first time, like no censoring, no holding back in any way, shape, or form. Going to the darkest recesses that I could, just just and being comfortable allowing myself to do that. And so that book will always be to me like my favorite in a way, because it was my first time that I just let it all out. I open a vein and here it is. uh yeah, so I totally understand that emotional connection to your work. And I think, I don't know if people understand, as writers, it's almost impossible to not put yourself in everything that you do, right? You find yourself you're still putting yourself in your work, right?
Yes. Yep. It's weird. Even like characters, probably every character that I write has something of me in them. Even
Mhm.
the villain, I think there's a little tiny piece of me in there.
Yeah, you have to. That's how you relate and
Yep.
make the characters real, and
Yep.
that's something I definitely want to talk about. Character development in the down the road. But yeah, I agree. We have to. You can't be totally detached from a character in it to make it the character feel real. Otherwise, it's going to be a caricature or a trope,
Yep.
or something like that. Yeah. Well, going back to YA fantasy, at the genre. So, what made you want to write that particular genre as opposed to just traditional fantasy? I know you liked it, but was it your love of reading the YA fantasy, or was there some other pull towards YA fantasy for you?
No, purely it's I'm always reading YA fantasy. So it's like that meme you always see, like for writers, whatever you're writing, make sure you enjoy reading it because you're going to read it over and over and over and over. And so I figure I just love YA fantasy, and the idea just kind of came to me. I might as well write it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Um, do you plan on writing in other genres, or are you going to stick with YA fantasy?
love my YA fantasy. I'm probably going to stick with it.
No,
Now,
that's fine. That's good.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that. Because I know other writers who tend to find their sweet spot, like you found the thing that you love, and they stay in that. I think because my first book was in a genre I didn't plan on ever writing. It's a cozy mystery, and always been more of a horror, sci-fi, or
Mhm.
comedy guy. So writing in this genre, which I did not know about, I had to do research actually to know what it was before I started writing. That was a stretch for me as a writer, but I really kind of found that I wrote things and explored relationships and all these things and connections with characters in ways that I found really satisfying as a writer, as a creator. But I would probably, as a consumer, never have bought my own book. You know,
Mm.
and so that is what I find intriguing, because when I hear about people or books, often on the Today Show, they will do, Jenna's Book Club or something. And I hear about these writers who write these books, like 5 generations of family dysfunction. I'm like, oh my God, I can't imagine like trying to even read 2 minutes of that. It would just like, no, no, I'd rather just not read it all. But as a creator though, I kind of get it. Like as a writer, I kind of get it, because there's a different satisfaction in creating than consuming. But you love both consuming and writing. But do you find that as well? Like there's something differently satisfying about creating a product that you like versus reading another's?
Yeah, I can see that. I can. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's so that's I kind of get it now. Because there comes a detachment. Like once you write something and set it out in the world, it's just kind of off on its own. Like you're usually on to your next work and your next work and your next work. You don't just stick around like the one thing I've made, because you're just going to keep on writing more and
Yep.
more, right? And so that's a whole different thing as well. Like the first movie I did, I felt uniquely sad when it was over, because I had been editing it and spending like 100 hours of editing, and I was experiencing all the joy and laughter of being with everyone in the movie and reliving all the laughter we did shooting it. So by the time I was done editing, I felt this unique sadness, like, oh, I'm gonna miss spending time with these people, even though it was just me watching video. But I've
I,
never. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I feel like that's how I'm gonna feel when this series is over because my Lana has been with me, oh my gosh, for so long now.
Yeah,
Like
with
I
17 years, you said 18 years, something like
it'll
that.
be 18 years in a couple of weeks. My brother passed away, and then
Yeah.
like a month after that, I started to write. Yes, I just feel like when the series is done, like wow, it's gonna feel strange.
Yeah. Are Do you think after that series you're you're going to move on to another
Oh yeah,
YA series?
I already have other ideas.
Oh, okay,
I
good,
have
good,
so
good.
many ideas, like I can't, I don't have time for them though.
Yes, isn't that the truth? It's like sometimes I wish I didn't have to sleep, because like, I could use those extra 8 hours, like, yeah, I got things I want to do.
Yes.
Right. Because there's always this like line of books, like you see, they're like staring at you, like,
Yes.
I'm waiting for you to finish that one because we're next.
Yep.
Um, what makes a good YA fantasy story to you? What elements are needed to make that story good?
I think to make a good YA fantasy, you have to be able to relate to the main character and what they're going through because I mean, it's fantasy. This stuff doesn't really happen in our normal everyday life. So there has to be some kind of element where you can relate to that character. And even though like wild, crazy, magical things are happening to them, you can almost picture yourself there with them. To me, that's
Mhm.
what makes a good YA fantasy.
Okay. Yeah. So character driven and the
Yeah,
fantastic elements. What kind of fantastic elements are necessary or come in, or the ones that you find yourself writing most about? Like what would be fantastic in your mind or in your books?
different worlds. My book, I write different dimensions. You get there through traveling through mirrors. Um,
Oh,
Magic. I have mermaids. I have oh boy, all kinds of things.
no, I like that. Um, no, that's cool. Yeah, so I like that. It's one thing I like doing the show about doing the show so much is meeting authors like yourself and discovering creative process and how we all get from like the same beginning to the same end, very wildly in different ways. And then also learning like these kinds of things, like the worlds that we make,
Yep.
and how they're so different and what makes them special.
Yes.
And so that's very exciting. So when you are writing, how do you know when you've written something, I'll say fantastic, put that in quotes, like the fantasy element? When do you know like you've reached your own litmus test, like, yeah, this is high fantasy for me?
Ooh, I think if it's just something that normally just wouldn't happen to me in everyday life, right? I mean, I can go to a mirror and push on it and nothing happens to me, but there are certain mirrors in this world where you walk through them and you can find yourself in a different dimension. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's pretty straightforward. I like that. Yeah. It's beyond. the supernatural, beyond the natural. Then yes, that makes sense. Well, since you had mentioned this world that you've been building, and I'd like to talk about the concept of world building because it's important. We have characters, we have a world that they need to live in, and those kind of have to be in somewhat of a harmony for it to be believable. So, how do you go about designing your world, or how have you gone about designing your world?
So it's funny. The world that Lana, when you're first introduced to Lana, she lives in just a small town in upstate New York, which is very modeled after like where I grew up. Um, and then Bridian, which is the world that, she's from, the other dimension that she ultimately ends up going back to, that came to me in a dream. Like, I know it's probably not the answer you're looking for. Really, it all came to me in a dream. And so I just kind of took it from there.
I like that. I mean, I remember ideas coming to me in dreams, and sometimes you wake up just enough to go, oh, that's gonna be a good idea. And then you go back to sleep and you forget it. That's usually what happens to me. But no, no, I love that aspect because I mean, fantasy is just the same thing with horror as opposed to science fiction. Those things then do tend to tap into our dream states.
Yeah.
Horror more in our nightmares, but there can be nightmarish aspects to fantasy as well. We have all the monsters and the horrible things that happen. Um, so no, I like that. You're paying attention to your dream,
Yeah.
and then once you kind of started that world, uh, how have you continued to develop it or flesh it out?
I think a lot of just notes. I kind of write everything down. Um, Especially this first book too, it has gone through so many reiterations. I remember some of the very first drafts were not good at all. My mom would read them though, and she would love them, and they were like the best thing ever. But like going back and reading them now, I cringe a little. Like they were not good. And so I think it's just been with every draft I do, like I did for it, the world just kind of kept getting fleshed out even more and even more. And then even when I thought it was good and I sent it to an editor and they're like, no, we need more here. So I think really having a good editor is key too. They can help you kind of find your blind spots.
Right. Yeah, that kind of developmental editing where they're
Yes.
looking at the big picture,
Yes.
as opposed to copy editing. Although that's a great skill too to have
Yes.
that ability. Right.
Yes.
Yeah, because sometimes we we're almost sometimes too close to our creation to
Yes.
see it, to see the gaps in our own logic, and it is nice to have someone who can see those gaps and being wanting our best, so they tell us what we can do to make our work better. No,
Yes.
that's good. What aspect of your world do you like the most?
Ooh, boy. I think it's um the part the is for book one, I think the chapter that I really liked writing was meeting they're called Altarians. They are kind of like a special type of mermaid that they're able to go on land and they also live underwater. And I feel like just their whole underwater world really intrigued me at first, and their backstory and why they are the way that they are. To me, that was probably one of my favorite parts of writing the first book. And that was one of the scenes that came to me very early on. And I remember I wrote that chapter prior to really having anything else.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm When they come on land, do they like walk like a lungfish with their arms? Do they grow legs? Do they waddle? I mean, this is I'm intrigued now how they motivate on land.
They legs, they kind of look
Oh,
like us. They have gills that kind of close over when they're on land. So it
okay.
takes them a while to kind of get acclimated
Okay.
before they can talk or anything.
And so the tails disappear and turn into legs when they get on land, or does they always have tails and legs?
No tails. They
Oh,
just
no tails. Oh, okay.
so they
They're
could
like,
probably cross this
oh,
just you and me if they wanted to.
I see. Okay, I
And when
see.
they go into water, they're kind of their gills reopen.
Oh, okay. It's from like a gill people versus like a traditional mermaid then.
Yes, yes,
Yes. Okay. That makes perfect sense. Yeah, like a creature from the Black Lagoon
yeah.
kind of. Oh no, that's great. I love that. Um, okay.
Skin is like different. Like they don't like they have like the scaly skin, the green scaly skin. Um,
Yeah.
but no tails. Yeah,
Okay. No, no, that's awesome. That's much more frightening
it kind of
than, yeah, that's much scarier because then, what if they get really angry and come on board and they want to attack somebody, but they can't go too far away from the shore because they'll dry out.
is.
Is that something that happens to them? Like, do they need to be like, can they only spend a certain amount of time outside of water before do they lose their power like outside of water?
No, but where they are now, something happens to them, and I don't want to kind of give it away, like kind
Sure.
of like backstory. Um, they're kind of more in water now because the people on land have just been too kind of awful to them, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of things have happened, and so they don't really go up on land much at all anymore.
Sure. Yeah,
So they
those
kind of leave
surface
that.
dwellers.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get it. That's awesome. Those are the kind of questions that I would ask if I'm creating this race. I'm like, because it reminds me of all the tropes about reading Aquaman growing up as a kid. Like, he has powers in water, but they diminish outside of the water. Like what good is him calling? He can't call any of the great beasts when he's out, middle of a city
Mhm.
telepathically. The only piece, he might be go to a aquarium and communicate with the fish in there, but he like kind of loses some of his edge if he's in the middle of like New York. Right. No, 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 that's good. Well, is there an aspect of your world that you like the least? Like when you design it, like and looking at it now, like I don't really care for this. I gotta change this.
Ooh, I don't think so. I think to me, writing, I struggled with this in the beginning. I did not like putting my main character through any of the hard things. There's almost this weird like protection that I have for her, but that doesn't make a good story. Like you have to, I think I'll kind of expand that answer, just say, just in general writing. That's kind of hard sometimes to put
Hmm.
your character through the ringer like that.
Yeah, I think so. Certainly can be. I guess I was just trying to think like I don't know if I like any of my characters enough to care about whether that happens to them. I was like, I'm being honest here. Um,
I care
and
too
like,
much.
well, no, I guess because each of my books, my series is like the one that's the splatter western. That my focus is on the rage. I mean, I love this character, Gage Black. He's awesome, but it's like it's almost the focus is on the rage and his venting. And my other series, it's a pulp series, action horror, Death's Head. It's just I'm still learning that character. I've only written one book, so I'm still kind of feeling him out. But it's more about the action and what happens.
Yeah.
Um, and then as my regular listeners will know, they're probably like, "Oh, Mark, you're gonna talk about this again." But what I'm done, my cozy mystery series is only gonna be 4 books. Each of them take place during a season. So I've done my winter book was the first one. Now I'm doing the spring book. And once it's finished with those 4 books, I'm going to be doing a horror story set in the same town with the same characters.
Oh, that's
Um,
interesting.
Killing everybody, the whole town, like every single character is going to die. And people are like, you can't do that. I'm like, yeah, I can. I mean, yeah. Why aren't you worried about what people are not going to be happy about that? I go, they don't have to read it. I mean, part of the doing is the exercise as the writer, like because I know the story. I've written the end. I mean, it's a gut punch. When I wrote it, I'm like, I felt it viscerally, like man. And I wanted to move people too. Like
Yes.
I especially the people who've read the cozies. I want them to read this and like I want them sobbing, like, oh my God, I can't believe you killed, like yeah, they're all gonna go. But
That's interesting.
I want that.
Will the cozy, like, will all the plot lines from the cozy mysteries, are they still there? Or is it just completely different?
No, everything that every story and plot line and character from the cozy series are gonna be shown off in the horror as well.
Oh
So
no.
I've been taking there's this pleasure I've had of like finding the most horrible things to do to these characters. And they're like, my wife's like, I thought you loved these characters. I go, yeah, I do. I do love these characters. Well, then you could never write another cozy mystery. I go, well, that wasn't my intention. So that's kind of fun as a writer.
Opposite. In my third book, spoiler alert, there is a death. And I'll tell you, I was like sobbing as I'm writing it. I can't imagine killing off like more than one person at a time.
I'm usually pretty dispassionate about those kinds of things. As I said, I've written horror before. It's like, that's my space. Um, but killing off these characters that I've written about, it's a whole different thing.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, and there was this weird like trade-off between like dread and exhilaration
Mhm.
of like penning the worst possible outcomes for
Yeah.
these characters, like and just anticipating like, oh man, readers, boy, they're just going to be gutted by this one. So that's what I'm really excited about. I think I'm most excited about that book coming out more than anything that I
Wow.
can anticipate. So,
Yeah.
so well, speaking of characters, let's talk about your characters and how you go about and creating and develop them. What is your process there?
Really just a lot of notes. Um, when I first started writing, I was kind of went into it as more of a pantser, like literally just writing to write and seeing what would come out. Um, Kind of like the more that I write and like the more drafts that I did of that first book, I really just kind of switched, I guess. I'm kind of like a good in between of a plotter and a pantser. Um, I kind of start out kind of pantsing it and just writing to write and just kind of seeing what happens and what I create, and then going through and really doing notes. I followed Save the Cat. Have you heard of that book? It's a
Save
writing
the
book.
cat.
It kind of helps you. I really recommend to any writers out there, by Save the Cat writes a novel. It's such a helpful book, and it kind of breaks up all of the novels that have really become like bestsellers, and they all have the same, they follow the same structure, and it kind of teaches you the structure of what like a successful book should have. And so I'll go through my Save the Cat notes and kind of plan out each beat, to kind of like pull everything together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Oh, okay. So again, another unique
Yes.
way of looking at development.
Yeah.
Another reason why I love doing this show. It's like, oh, okay, that's something I'd never heard before. That's awesome. So, which of your characters would you most like to have a drink with?
Oh, Lana, 100%.
I was gonna say, well, you've already talked about her so much. I'm like, well, this is kind of a moot point. It's probably gonna say Lana, but um,
Yeah.
have you imagined like spending time with her? I mean, she's as you in a lot of ways, but as a writer, are you, I know people imagine and talking to their characters all the time, which is something that I've never imagined sitting down and talking with the character.
Yeah.
Although when I came up with this question, I began thinking which of my characters would I like to talk with,
Mhm.
um, and I'm like, oh, because I don't. Yeah, it's just something that never entered my brain.
Yeah.
So,
Eh,
what? Imagine you're sitting with Lana. What would be the first question you would ask her?
how are you doing?
How would she answer?
She's hanging in there.
Okay, good. Yeah, I love
I think at this point with book three, she'd be telling me to kind of slow it down a little bit. She needs a break.
that. Um, maybe yes. Have you thought about taking that break and like writing one of the other genre books first, to give her that break and some time and space away to let
I
her rest, and then coming back to your original genre or fan
I
story?
have, and it's more, I think at times I need a rest from the series.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
Definitely. And I kind of toy back and forth with if I'm going to start book four immediately, like after I'm completely done with book three, or if
Mhm.
I should just start something else and kind of give
Yeah.
myself that little break.
Yeah.
Uh, and I don't know, I haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense. What after wrote the cozy, I I also didn't want to be known as a cozy mystery writer because I've written so much other stuff.
Yeah.
And I didn't want some deranged Kathy Bates coming and hobbling me, telling me to write the next cozy. But like, no, I want to write a splatter western. No, you're not, Mr. Man. You're gonna write. I want to see what happens to Abby. Which is what's happening. People who read the
Yeah.
first book are like, hey, when's the next book coming out?
Next one. Yep.
Yeah. But writing in those multiple genres, 4 books, 4 different genres, then
Mhm.
coming back to writing the second of the cozy series was really fascinating. Like there was a little trepidation coming into it because it's been such a long time since I had been in that world. It was like, oh, that's gonna feel a little weird.
Yeah.
And but I also felt a lot more confidence in my prose than I
Mhm.
did at the first time.
Yeah.
Like when I started writing, I'm like, oh, okay. You know, it was like, oh, okay, that I think I'll be okay here.
Yeah.
Um, but that was kind of interesting to me.
Yeah.
And I had to go back and reread my first book because it had been a couple of years since I had published it. And that's when I was like waiting for the cringe, like, and it really wasn't as cringy as I thought it would be. There were a few moments that were a little schmaltzy, which like, oh, okay, a
Yeah.
little too saccharine here, Mark. But there were more moments of like, oh, that's a good line. That's not bad. And
Love those moments.
yes,
Have moments
yes,
that you're like, oh wow, this isn't really that bad.
right, yeah, exactly. And like, I was more astonished at just like going, my God, I don't remember writing this at all. You know? For almost the entire book. I'm like, I know I did the act of writing, but you know how when you write, you're just lost in the moment. You're right,
Yep.
just producing, and
Yep.
and you know if you're making progress.
Yep.
But reading again, I'm like, God, like 90% of the book, I just had no recollection of writing. And I'm like, I felt like Stephen King when he wrote Cujo on Coke.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know if you know that story. He
Oh,
says he was so doing Coke so much at that time, the early 80s, he doesn't recall writing Cujo at all.
wow.
And I wasn't on Coke or anything. So, but I didn't remember writing most of it. I mean, I knew what scenes were coming up. Like,
Yeah.
okay, this is going to happen. But the actual like getting to that scene, I found little pleasant surprises. Like, oh,
Yes.
this is this
I
is
love
actually kind of
those.
nice.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And I felt that way about all my books. It's like I I surprised myself. Like,
Yeah.
wow, okay, you did all right here, Mark. You didn't do so. Yeah, this is pretty good. Look at you, you son of a bitch. That's pretty good. Um, yeah. Uh, let's talk a little bit about your plotting because you mentioned that you were started off with as a pantser,
Yeah.
and now that you do some of this hybrid kind of thing. So can you talk about your creative process and if you want to talk about your organization as well, if they're kind of intertwined at some level, how you proceed from organization to drafting, or we can separate it if you want to talk about just your writing process versus your organization process.
I think especially writing a series, like you have to remember everything that happened like from book one on, and you don't want to like forget anything. I just have a notebook that I use, just a
Mhm.
plain notebook, and I just have it like kind of broken up into sections. I have like main plot points from the first book, main plot points from the second book, now that they're already out. And as I go through and I'm plan the next book, I just kind of take time. I look at those notes. Sometimes I'll reread the first book and, the second book just to kind of put myself back into that world and kind of back into Lana's shoes. And I I think mainly in the beginning, I just kind of write what comes, any plot points that I think I want to visit, any cool scenes that are kind of coming in my head. Um, and then from there, I bring up my Save the Cat, kind of write out my beats, my plot points, and then just kind of take it from there.
Okay.
I
So even your organization is kind of pantsed in a way.
yeah,
You're pantsing, you're plotting as you go.
yes.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
As I write, I kind of go off my notes. Like I
Mhm.
like to have my chapters at least broken out with like one or two plot points in each chapter. So
Okay.
I know where the story is going. Like
Right,
I'll be
right.
thinking.
But how exactly you get there, that kind of
I
happens through the writing itself.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I get it. I completely get it. I think no matter how much you plot out, I'm a plotter. Comes
Question.
from years in academia. And I taught English for quite a long time. So I
Mhm.
taught my students now academic paper writing is different than other
Yeah.
types of writing because it is logical and orderly and you have to present an argument um, but I kept all that organization into my fiction. So uh, my outline, I'm a lister, so that's how I generate
Mhm.
ideas. I just list and then I take the ideas I like and I start developing and expanding them and just writing down everything because you never know what's going to be useful and what's not. And then once I start, I then put everything into an outline. That's how I arrange my story. And with my cozies, all the stories take place in a course of a week. So I have to make sure day by day, here's what's happening per day. It's a
Yeah.
busy week. It's a really busy week, especially this book. There's a lot crammed in this week. I'm like, maybe I should rethink this week thing. But I like having that outline because it doesn't matter how detailed the outline. My current one is like 23 pages for my new book, but you still have to get from point A to point B to point C
Yeah.
word at a time. You even though you know exactly what's going to happen, getting to there still involves writing down sentences and
Yeah.
dialogue and
I like being surprised. I like to see like where the story kind of goes on its own.
oh, really? Okay.
There are parts that just kind of I never really expected it, and it just kind of happens organically on its
Mm-hmm.
own. And yeah,
I get that too
yeah,
because I've had those moments of surprise and I let them happen, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't, and it's okay. I can take it out and cannibalize it. um and like an example in the first book, I knew I was writing, Abby was the main character. She's depressed because she just lost her job and she's trying to figure herself out, and um she was just kind of trying to work through these feelings of being lost. Like, she knows other people succeed and get to this point, but she doesn't know where the point is. She felt lost, like in the middle of this like dark lake at night, and I'm terrified of deep bodies of water. They just
oh yeah,
terrify me. And I'm just thinking, this is the scariest thing for me. So of course I'm going to put her in there, just let her flop around for a while. But she's imagining, using this as a metaphor. And when I wrote this, the imagery is really great, but it's terrifying. I'm like, this is just too dark for a cozy mystery. But I knew I was just going to let it write out, because you have to write it out.
yeah,
You're not be able to use it, but you can use it for something else.
yeah,
And so I'm like, I can't cannibalizing that. I'm going to put that in the horror book because it's more appropriate. Then I'll find a way to use it because it's too good not to use.
yeah,
um so, but I still find myself having those same moments of discovery and imagination, but it doesn't alter necessarily the story as much as something about the characters and the relationships kind of takes its own turn, or the way they express themselves,
yeah,
or how they develop. That's where the that's where the discovery happens for me, because the plot I need to follow because it's a mystery, and et cetera, et cetera. Gotta lay those crumbs.
yeah,
But it's that same discovery happens, and the characters kind of take over and they kind of blossom in ways that I didn't expect. So
yeah,
I still love that feeling of like, oh, I
yeah.
didn't expect that.
And then I usually I just finish the draft. I don't really edit anything until I have a draft done, like a whole complete draft. And then I like to go back and kind of do my own edits after. I feel
Hmm.
like you get too bogged down trying to edit as you go.
Yes.
So to me, I just like finishing, having just a complete draft first and then going back through.
I wholeheartedly agree, because the every part of the writing process has its own demands and parts of the brain that you need to be. And I always tell my students the same way: when you are drafting, don't censor yourself. There's
Oh,
going to be a time for that when you're all done. Don't That has its own time. Don't worry about it. Don't try to make it perfect as you go, because if you're doing a sculpture, you're just throwing clay into a rough shape. You just want to kind of get the rough idea of what it's going to be.
mhm.
um, the revision will allow you to make the fine cuts and the details, and
Yes.
but you have to get it in the shape to begin with.
Yeah.
you know and I totally agree. And I've met and talked with writers who like to edit as they go, and I'm like,
Oh my gosh, how do you do that?
I know it's like taking a fingernail file and like scraping my teeth, like, um no, yeah, but that seems to work for them. But I think that what it does is you're sterilizing the growth medium
Yeah.
as you go. Like, you're making it perfectly formed, instead of seeing something in its totality.
Picture.
And because you never know what it's going to be at the end. I mean,
Yeah.
if you like someone who's a relative pantser, you have an ideas, but if you alter stuff too much, too fixed in one way, and say we're done, that in a way kind of stunts what could happen afterwards, I think.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
um of all the parts of the writing process, which do you enjoy the most?
When the book is done.
There you go. Nice.
There's such
Yes.
a sense of like accomplishment like when you're at a place where you're like, oh wow, like look at everything I did. I enjoy that the most.
Yeah,
I
that's
will say
awesome.
editing. I hate the editing
That
process.
was gonna be my follow-up. Like, what do you like the least? Okay.
Worst. I hate it. And I'm in kind of editing right now with book 3. I haven't got any of my edits back, but there's a part of me that's like, I just don't want them.
Can it be done already?
I know
Yes.
it's so hard.
What is it that you find most difficult or challenging about the editing process?
I think it's stepping away from it and then coming back and really having to dissect it. And especially, I think more specifically, it's the developmental editing aspect,
Mhm.
um, because whole scenes could be changed. And
Right.
you have to put yourself right back where you were,
Yeah.
and kind of get back into that feeling and that story when I'm just ready to
Mhm.
be on. I'm ready for the next book. Like I'm kind of
You're over it.
over
Yes.
it.
Yes. I know
It's
a hundred
hard to
percent.
dissect it and kind of remold it and reshape it. For me, anyway, there could be people out there who love the editing process.
Yeah, I mean, I understand it's where you can make what you've done and make it better and do it, but it's hard work. It's different if you're writing, I've had to throw away entire chapters
Yes.
before and rewrite them or just excise them altogether
Yep.
because they weren't working. And that can be really frustrating.
It is.
Um, but
Especially when you think it works, and then
right,
you're back from that developmental editor and they're like, no, this really doesn't work. This is not how
right.
it's
You're like, okay. And then they say, you could make it work. You're a writer. You can do that. I'm like, I thought I did the first time. Um, Right. But now I'm cognizant, I'm well aware of there are at least two areas in my new book that I know are going to need to be rewritten,
Yeah.
because there are two characters who just don't have any personality. They are just a trout flopping around on the shore. They
Yeah.
just, I mean, and they were really tertiary in the first book, but again, I'm trying to develop them with every book. And I'm like, I think the reason why I'm having a hard time with them because I know what they look like, and that's it. I
Yeah.
didn't I didn't really expect them to take on larger roles. I wasn't going to develop them more, but now I find the need to, and I just haven't sat down and thought about them. I know what they do, and that's it.
Yeah.
And it's not enough. And so when I was writing them, it's like this dialogue is bad, this dialogue is flat, and I even put notes on myself in all caps.
I do too.
Change this. Yes, it's like this sucks, Mark.
Back to this.
Yes, fix this. Yeah. So now I'm like, huh. So I well aware of going to that. Like, yep,
Yeah.
I know. I know. Like I'm more confident in like telling the story, less so in these characters, and that's okay. I mean, I'm bringing in a lot of new characters. I better get used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll all be dead soon anyway. It won't matter.
Oh
Uh,
gosh. So funny.
it is. I know. Um, I'm just waiting for the anger
Yeah, that
responses.
you're gonna get
I know.
those news.
I'm so just looking forward to that. Oh, okay. As a writer, we're always taught a couple things. Like whenever you first go into a creative writing class, you're taught to write what you know, and then we had to find this elusive thing called our voice.
Yeah.
So when did you first come to realize what your writer voice was?
I've never even taken a creative writing course at all. Um, I think it really took me though a few drafts of my first book to really kind of find my voice and to find my kind of unique way of telling the story. Um, like I said, those first few drafts were not good at all. Very flat, very one-dimensional. Um, I think it just took me some time. It took me drafts, but now that I found it, I definitely feel more confident in it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It does take a long time. I think it's one thing that sometimes writers get frustrated with early because we always start by imitating, things that
Yes.
we like.
Yep.
If we think we want to write the fantasy like you were doing the YA fantasy, you write kind of what you've read. It's just
Yep.
kind of this is my experience. I'm going to try to do something like this. And then we go back and we have the cringe like, but that's how we always start. We always start with imitation.
Yep.
And until we become confident and like know that we can say things and
Yep.
and be happy with how we say them, our own voice. And
And
that takes a while.
I think working with an editor too really kind of pushed me. Especially that first book. I rewrote whole parts of it because they just weren't really flowing. And I feel like after working with somebody else, like somebody I'm not related to, reading the book
Yeah,
and kind
right.
of telling me like, what parts really work and why this character isn't acting like a person would. Like this thing happened to them, they're gonna have emotions. They're just not acting like it. And I feel like after working with a couple editors, something kind of clicked too. And so now even as I'm writing, I'm like thinking already of like, oh, this won't work because I can just see the editor coming back at me and telling me, no, this doesn't work.
Right.
I
Well,
think
that's
with
good that you
time
have that.
it comes.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's important to have that writer, that reader team around you who you can trust to give you honest feedback.
Yes.
Like I need to know, and I tell them, and like, and I appreciate my readers so much because they all have different strengths and different backgrounds.
Yep.
And one is a really good copy editor reader because she finds like every typo, every mistake. That's great. I love that because I don't rely on Word, and even though I taught English, it doesn't mean I'm going to find every typo because it's just going to happen.
Yep.
And then I have another friend who's, a lot of my readers are also writers, so that's
Mhm.
helpful to have
That's
that.
helpful.
And we've had such a long relationship that I want them to be completely honest. Like there's no ego here. I'm
Yep.
not gonna cry. Um, and I want them to be honest and tell me what's not working. And that's what happened in the last book. And I knew when I submitted it, I didn't say anything. I said there, I made a plot choice that I wasn't sure about. And then I had a chapter that I'm like, I don't know, this
Mhm.
chapter doesn't feel right. So I
Yeah.
kind of had that instinct. And those are the 2 points that he picked out. And I'm like, okay, that just confirmed to me what I was like suspicious of.
Yep.
So I appreciated that coming from him. Because I needed to hear that. Like I
Yeah.
needed to know that wasn't work. So that's why I took out the whole chapter, just like gutted it from the story. And I thought I could use this for something else.
Yep.
This is information that I can kind of, instead of cramming into a chapter, I can kind of dole out over books, you
Yep.
know, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. Rewriting the major plot line that I had changed, that took a little bit more work, but it was important and necessary and made the overall book stronger and more believable. And
Oh,
that's
yep.
what was necessary. Um, do you do any kinds of research for your books? Like when you're writing, do you
No,
anything at all? No?
I don't. Let me think.
Okay.
I mean, I do the research of like my like Save the Cat, like how is the
Hmm.
best way to structure a novel.
Oh, okay.
But beyond that, I really don't. I just kind of write what comes to me.
Okay.
It sounds so weird, but a lot of the major plot points, and I can't even explain it, like it just comes to me. I almost see it in my mind, almost as it's like a movie kind of
Hmm.
playing out.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I don't think I haven't really done any research for anything. And see, and because I love YA fantasy so much, and that's just what I write. If I were to probably write in a different genre, I imagine I probably would have to.
Yeah.
Like I'm not
Because
really used to.
Yeah, because fantasy you're inventing wholesale. I mean,
Yeah,
you're inventing
I can make
these
whatever I want.
guild people. Yeah, and as long as your world is consistent with itself,
Yes.
that's fine. Like,
Yep.
yes, these are the all stones, and the all stones heal
Yes.
us.
Yes.
Okay, sure, why not? You know,
Question.
yeah, they fell from the sky one day. We picked them up, and they glow and they heal us. Like,
Yes.
that's fine. Um, right, exactly. Yeah, no, I get that. I do enjoy elements of research. All my books I've researched a little bit. My third one was nonfiction, so there's a lot of research.
Oh
But
yeah.
but when I did my pulp western, it's set right after the Civil War, so I'm researching the weapons of the time and mail routes and different states, what was going on with different Union troops, like from Ohio, the history of Arizona, just things that I kind of knew a little bit because you want those details to be accurate. Because if someone who likes historical fiction picks it up and reads it, and they're like, "Hey, this weapon didn't come out till like 1875, and not 1870," um, so that's important. And then Death's Head takes place in the early 1930s near Haiti. So I did a lot of research into Haiti and voodoo and zombies and the Loa involved with voodoo, and because that's part of the story of one of the characters, the Samedi, the king of the dead, is a major character. And I wanted to make sure I was portraying him accurately because I wanted to be respectful of the religion. and do it right, you
Yeah.
know. And he's no through the research I found out, oh, this guy is such a character. He is so funny because that's part of his characteristics. He's humorous. He's really kind of sarcastic and
Yeah.
joke. He makes all these like broad, like dirty jokes kinds of things. I'm like, oh, this guy's gonna be fun to write, and it really was. And if I had not known any of that, I would like, I don't know what to do.
Oh, it kind
So
of
I
takes fun away from it though. I don't, that's why I like writing YA fantasy. To me, that research part, that just doesn't sound fun. I did enough research in school.
right. Well, I guess because there's part of me that's still gonna be always an
Mhm.
academic, and I still like learning things, but it wasn't. I mean, I because I knew the where this was going on, and one of the characters had fought in World War I, and you know, he was a special, you know, like special forces. I was just researching that just enough to know, like I wanted to know what battles they were in, and just enough to kind of ground it in reality because it is
Yeah.
set in a specific time in a real place.
Mm.
Now, one of the islands, Koshamar, is not a real place. That's the island shrouded in mystery and fog. You know, that's where the horror elements come in. But as far as like, if I'm going to write a story that takes place in Haiti, I kind
Yeah.
of know I need to know the geography, the layout of the land, the
Yeah.
towns, and the, you know, just enough, because that I think has to be reliable. The
Yeah.
story can be fantastic
Yeah. Mhm.
if we're taking, you know, place in the real world to an extent. But
Yeah.
yeah, I still love that. I still love that research, just because I think I'm a nerd in that regard. Like I just, you know, I like having that bank of information and that knowledge. And so yeah, the main character has all these, like, I had to he had spent 10 years traveling around Europe and Asia learning all these mystic kinds of fighting styles and things like that. So I did all kinds of research, like hand-to-hand combat and different
Oh,
weaponry and things like that that were used. I'm like, just so that I could employ it
yeah.
skillfully into part of the story, you know.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, oh, okay, this is pretty fun, you know. Um, do you have a favorite time of day that you like to write?
That's tricky just because I do work full time and I have a 5-year-old. So I'm kind
That's
of
another full. So you have two full-time jobs,
yeah, it
essentially.
is. I do have a very supportive husband though, who does pick up a lot of the slack.
Mhm,
um, but really, I just kind of am writing during my pockets of time that I have. My lunch break at work, I'll pull out my notebook and just start writing.
mhm,
At night when my son's asleep, that's usually when I get a lot of the my writing done.
mhm.
But
So you're always given that turkey dressing. A lot of
yes,
tryptophan. Want some extra turkey with that? Here's some gravy. Heavy mashed potatoes. Those carbs will put you. You'll sleep well tonight. I got a chapter to finish.
yeah,
Um,
and I guess on weekends too. Weekends are a
sure.
good time to write, but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
A little more. Little not nearly as many demands on your time.
yes.
When you are writing, do you like listen to music or anything like that, or have other distractions going on?
I generally listen to music. Usually like instrumental music, something without words. When
Hmm.
I'm listening to words, for some reason it just kind of takes me out of the story.
Yeah.
So I just kind of listen to like instrumental music. That really helps me.
Yeah. Do you have any particular types of instrumental? Like what kinds of music do you like to listen to?
I don't. I just kind of pull up a playlist and just kind of type in instrumental and just see where it takes me.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. All
Yeah.
right. Yeah. I do the same thing. I need to have music without words.
Yes.
Um, except for I've got like Mozart and Beethoven both on my playlist, and the Mozart, like the arias and or not the arias, but the requiems and the
Oh,
misse, those kinds of things. I have, but I don't have like the operas because it's just too much, you know.
yeah. Yeah.
But everything else, like soundtracks, Alien is a good soundtrack for me to write. It's ambient and kind of dark, and
Yeah.
um, the soundtrack to the movie Ravenous is really good. And then I have a lot of like 1930s music, like with vibraphone, kind of bouncy and kind of fun, and because it's a little, for my cozy mystery, that's what I use to write that kind of bouncy and light. Because there's also a music station in the town that plays this music, so
Oh,
it kind of puts me in that kind of happy place to write something cozy, you know.
yeah.
Um, No, but I totally get it. I'll probably, when I write the horror book, I'll probably listen to a lot of Slayer, things like
Oh,
that.
geez.
Stuff like that. Yeah. Can you tell me how it felt seeing your book in print for the first time? Like when you held that first copy, what was that like for you?
Very surreal. It was, and also nerve-wracking at the same time, if that makes sense. Just because the story, I'd been working on it for so long and it was just my story. Only a few other people had read it. And then when I really got serious about wanting to publish it, it was just very kind of nerve-wracking to see how people would like it, I guess, to see if it would kind of find its audience. But at the same time, it was just such a really surreal moment when I got my first copy of it, just opening the box and actually seeing it. It- yeah, it was really amazing. Amazing but surreal, nerve-wracking. I think it was just all the emotions kind of mixed into one. Yeah.
Hmm. Yes, it is a little weird and
Yeah.
wonderful. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like something cements in like the reality of it. Like, oh, okay,
Like it's
it's
gonna be
different
around
than seeing it on a
forever.
screen.
Yes.
What was the last part you said? Sorry.
Could be around forever now. Long after I'm gone, someone might find the book.
Right, I know. Ah, yes,
Weird to think about.
Jessica R. LeMore. Yes, the 21st century master. Yes, the good old days of YA fantasy,
Yes.
right? Yes. One of the giants. Yes,
Yeah.
that's what we want to hear, right? About us, right? In the future. Yeah. Um, I know because of the pandemic, hopefully it's winding down, but do you ever do like any book shows or do personal appearances to sell your books?
I haven't. I am not good at marketing. It's probably like I'm just not someone that really likes to like put myself out there like that. So the past year has been like a learning curve as I try to navigate like Instagram, and now I'm on TikTok trying to figure that out. Um but I think about it. I think about doing like the little fairs around our town. We'll see where I go.
Hmm. That's a uniquely kind of interesting and rewarding experience as
Yeah.
well. When people who don't know you
Yeah.
buy your books and they ask you to sign them, personalize them,
Yeah.
that's really kind of thrilling in a way.
It
You know, and you'll get questions like, so how do you write a book? But they don't want to hear the answer, like, well, how much time do you
let
have?
me start from the
Yeah, right. But I hope every writer gets to experience that because there's something delightful, especially like the group I do, that does shows around where I live. They do shows like 48 weeks a year or something like that. And before the pandemic kicked in, I was doing book shows with them, especially in November, December, because Christmas time, it's a good time for people to buy
beginning.
books. And since my first cozy takes place, it's the week after Christmas, it was a good book for that time. And then some of the vendors, when they would coming by before the show, they would see my books and they're like, oh, and they would buy it, which I thought was really sweet. And then they would see me again afterwards. They had read the book. They go, oh, and they would talk about it. And then that was like a wonderful, or people who had bought it at one show and they would tell me, that they had bought it and they liked it or whatever. And
Yeah.
no one flipped me off yet, or no one like yelled at me or spat at me. So I guess that was like, okay. But
One of these days I'll do something like that. Mhm.
yeah, I hope you do.
Yeah.
I think every writer should be out being
Mhm.
able to sell and doing a book fairs or book shows or some kind of craft fair where you can sell your books and
Yeah.
talk about them. And yeah, it's a really very special experience. You may not sell enough to cover the table costs, but like, it's a good day if you break even. That's not bad. um, just a few more questions and we'll
Yeah.
let you get out of here. You said Uh, oh, we talked about that marketing and social media. You're not really good with social media, you
Oh
were
my
saying?
gosh. I'm just someone that doesn't really like to put myself out there. Honestly, when you reached out to me, I was gonna say no. I'm like, do I really like, can I do this? And then my husband's like, yeah, you're doing it.
Get out there.
Yes.
Well, that's good. I hope you're having a good time.
Yes, I am.
Good. Well, maybe this will help
I
you
know
get out
it's
there more.
yes.
Good. Well, that's awesome.
I find marketing, it's hard. I don't know. Do you struggle with marketing at all?
I struggle with sales. Like I'm
Oh,
good. I'm a shameless self-promoter.
yeah.
I don't know if you noticed the two posters behind me.
Okay.
These are two of my movies, Monster Party Beach and Quest for Uranus.
Yeah.
I have my books over here, more shameless
Oh my gosh, I
self-promotion.
didn't even see those.
Yes, my Death's Head and Gage Black.
Okay.
So, and I do two other podcasts, and
Okay.
I'm a shameless self-promoter. I have no problem with that saying, love me, So,
Like that.
what that's one thing that's great about something like this
Mhm.
is that it can cross pollinate. Like I share your stuff on my social media, you share on yours, and everyone shares, and then we kind of broaden the circle of awareness for everybody. And
Yeah.
as indie writers, that's the hard thing to get recognition. But
Yes.
I've met so many wonderful people through Instagram.
Yes.
Not so much Facebook. There are writer groups that I belong to, but there's not the kind of
The
it's a
indie
different interaction.
is really great. I mean, everyone is so supportive. I love the Instagram writing community. I've met like some
Yeah.
really good friends on there. Yeah.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yep.
And when other writers are, I don't ever ask people to buy my stuff. On Facebook, I let people know, like, hey, here's my book and you can go buy it. You should go buy it.
Yeah.
On Instagram, I like posting it, but then other writers who are in my circle, they would like would buy my books and like post pictures of like, oh, I got my book today. I'm like, and they read it and they give me reviews like, oh my God, it's just like, like, thank you. You can't, I mean, it's so kind that they want to do that. Um, but yeah, I agree. This is a supportive community. And
Yeah.
so that's why I like doing this is to getting to meet people and hearing their stories. And it's all amazing
Yeah.
how we do different things. And everyone has been different.
Why we write and yeah, it is interesting.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you came on and that
Oh,
you're stepping out of your comfort zone. That's awesome. Thank you. So if you had a writer fantasy, like
ooh.
what would it be?
Oh, um, I would love to see my series like is a Netflix TV show or, something out there. I'm not 100% stuck on Netflix, but whoever wants it.
Mhm.
Just how amazing would that feel to see something you created and you wrote just out there with more people to see it? Just,
Yeah. And
you know,
hopefully that they would like it and then go buy
yeah,
your books.
yeah,
Right. Yes. They
yeah.
would feed off of one another. Right. No, I totally get it.
It'd be also
Would
really cool to make a living writing full time.
wouldn't that be nice?
It'd be so cool.
Yeah, one of the writers groups I'm in on Facebook is like 20 books to 50K. And it's
Yes,
about,
I do.
yeah, it's like there's no way in hell it's gonna work for me. I just know it.
So
It's
many
just
people are so amazing, right? There are people pulling in so much money. I
yeah, I'm staggered. I'm like, I don't know what you're doing. Maybe I'm not taking out enough ads, but I
know.
put myself out there and I do stuff. And I think the genre, the cozy does pretty well. I get
Mhm.
lots of people reading Gage Black through Kindle for free, but I'm not getting shit for that. I'm like,
Oh, I know.
I
Yeah.
so I'm taking it off Kindle like unlimited. Like, no,
Oh,
you're gonna pay for this. It's only $10, $11. Buy the book. And like, no more free reads. I'm no, because if the page mount would have translated into sales, it'd be like 200 sales. I'm like, I could use the money, um quit buying my stuff, get my stuff for free. Yeah, because Kindle's not going to pay you. I'm going to get like 1.8 cents for every 50 pages read. I'm like, what am I going to do with that,
so I did put my books in Kindle Unlimited. This is my first time with it, and I'm
Yeah,
kind of just hoping right now just to get some more exposure with it.
yeah,
So I don't
it's
know
not
how
going to pay off. I'm just telling you, it's
yeah,
not.
yeah,
These books have been on it for a couple of years now, and it's like, no.
yeah.
No, I don't know what it is. The niche groups, like, I know my writing is niche. Other than cozy mystery, that's a broad category, but splatter western, pretty
Yeah.
niche, and like pulp action horror, again, kind of niche. so I'm curious as to, I think the cozy series will be the big seller, but I'm curious as to when I do the straight horror book. I think
Okay.
that horror is a big genre. Horror sells really well.
Yeah.
So I just think otherwise people just don't want to, I don't know what it is. And then most of the, if you know on that page, they're saying, well, you got to write to the audience and know what's hot in the market and write to that. And like, I can't, I just want to write what I want to
I
write,
want to write what I want to write.
because
Yeah.
then, yeah. And there are people who are really good at like shutting down and writing to market and
Yep.
knowing what a good story is and simply telling a story.
Yep.
And that's how they live. But,
Yep.
you know, you miss all the joy of catharsis and that comes with writing, and the
Yeah.
pleasure of creation has got to just be, I mean, you got to be dead inside to do that, I
I
would think.
know.
I mean, I admire the pulp writers, like the guy who wrote The Shadow and all, he wrote like 237 novels in 20 years. He was just like, a book a month, just cranking them out.
Do
They were
that.
short. Pulps are like 45,000 words, but still,
Yeah,
this
that's
the
a lot.
amount of work.
Yeah.
And he was able to do that because that's what he could do. He could just write and just make up stories.
Wow.
I want to be able to do that. I want to write, to have a 10,000 word day.
Yeah.
I think the most I ever did was like 4,600 or something. I'm like, how the hell did I write 4,600 words? That like,
Yes.
because it felt effortless. I'm like, yeah, I'm doing pretty okay. And I thought, oh yeah, I've hit my 2,000. Like, and the next thing I checked, I'm like, holy crap, what did I do?
A good night for me is like 1,000 words. I'll take it.
Yeah, that's a goal, like 1,000, 1,500, 2,000. I mean, as I was drafting, the more I wrote, the better I was getting at a per page, per day word count.
Yeah.
And aiming for 2,000 is now what I try to do. I haven't written for a while because I'm finishing up a grad program. Like I do enough writing for grad school. Like I just I'm doing too many other things. So something's got to give. I'm gonna like have to slow things down. But I just found myself naturally writing more. I think maybe because when you do something, the more you do it, you get more efficient
You do, yeah.
at it and get a little better. So,
Yeah.
but every day is not going to be like that. Some days if you get 500 words, you're happy. Like,
Yes.
it's
Some
just,
days are hard. I just give up. I'll write 10 words and I'm like, well, there's 10 words that I didn't have before.
yeah, it's like, when it's not working and it's a
Yeah.
struggle.
Yeah.
And it's not like you're trying to like, I'm waiting for the muse. No, it's not that at all. It's just, it's not, we're not machines.
Yeah.
Although some people can be, and I admire that. A
I
part of
do.
me wants that. I want to write 10,000 words a day. I would love that, you know,
Yes.
to crank out 20 pages a day like Stephen King. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, no big deal. Um, you know, but that's what he does. That's his job.
Yeah.
And I guess if I was given, like when he got an advance for Carrie, he got his 50 grand or whatever it was because
Yeah.
they bought him. Like, well, then if you know that this is your job, I guess eight
You have
hours a
more
day.
time. Yep.
Yeah, the pressure's off,
Yeah.
and he's not dealing with a 5-year-old running around, and he's doing cocaine. So he has plenty of speed, so he can write. I keep on saying these things, hoping that eventually they come around and they'll get to Stephen King and he'll like want to come on my show. Like, I'm going to set that bastard just as straight.
Happy. Start manifesting that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Um, yeah, I like you, Mr. King. I'm not crazy about all your stuff, but you're a competent writer. I'm not going to take that away from you. Um, that would be funny if he shows up. That would be great. Okay, just a few more questions. We'll get out of here. What advice would you give for anyone who wants to write?
Ooh, don't listen to other people. If you just write what you want to write, by Save the Cat writes a novel. Really, I can't recommend that enough. I tell everybody about that book. Um, and there will be people who don't like your book, and that's okay. There could be family members that don't like your book or friends that don't like your book. A-okay. They can move on. If they think they can do better, let them. They can do better. They can write their own book.
Right. There's enough room at the hill for everyone to fly their own flag.
There is, yes.
Yeah.
And
Right.
follow your dreams. If that's something that you're passionate about, just do it. Just do it.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have family and friends who don't read my stuff. Um, and I'll admit it hurts. Like I want to share this part of myself with them. I'm
Yes.
like, why won't you read what I've written? I mean, my mom won't read my book Toxic because it's all about my becoming an apostate and giving up my Christianity. And
Oh,
it's, I got a 3-star review on Goodreads for too many F bombs. So because I like to swear.
Wow.
Yeah, this is a been a pretty clean episode comparatively, because I had to feel out, I don't want to, I'm not sure everyone's okay with swearing, but I
Yeah.
just enjoy it. I like all the words, they're good words.
I
And
think
but it still hurts. Like I like,
us.
I want them to read these things, like my other stuff. Like, just get past the word fuck. It's okay. It's not gonna bite you.
Yeah.
But I'm writing these books. Why don't you read them? Yeah, and it's a
It
frustration to a point. Like, because
is.
to me, it's because they're so important. And I'm
Yeah.
like sharing. It's like they're denying. They're like, it's like they don't want to know me. Like they're just rejecting me in a way. Like, no, you're enough. We know who you are. We don't want to read your crap. That's like, they'll read the cozy mystery, but that's it. And some people
Correct.
don't read anything. It's like, nah,
But that's
no thanks.
it just might not be their genre.
Yeah, I
I
guess.
it is hard though when you hear when you don't have that support. I've been pretty lucky, a lot of my friends, a lot of my family, even my coworkers, they've all been so supportive. Um, they bought the book, they tell me about it. So it's always exciting.
That's
Yeah.
good. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I like to joke about it. Uh, you know, it's just right, because I've always, I'm the kind of person who would buy and support and read, even
Yes.
though I don't like it or it's
Yep.
not my thing, because
I still leave
the
a 5-star
friendship means
review.
way more to me. Like, I'm supporting you, not,
Yes.
I may not like what you've done, but
But
that's
I'm still gonna
irrelevant.
support you.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's not, if we're friends, then yeah,
Yeah. Mhm.
I'm gonna support you because we're friends. That doesn't matter. I don't may not like your creative product, your art, but that's irrelevant,
Yeah.
and I guess I kind of, and I do have friends who are like that. Don't get
Mhm.
me wrong, I do. I have friends who support me, and that's, it's not that they don't exist. It's
Yeah.
just there's a small circle of people who I would really really like to
Yeah.
have read my stuff, and the why they don't, it's like, God damn you, why? you know
It is
it's just
it's
funny.
very easy to get kind of caught up in other people's opinions, I guess, of you and your work and whether they think it's good
Mm,
or not. And that's something you really have to let go of. That
yeah,
was like
yeah,
a
that's
hard
true.
for me to
And I
do.
don't care what they think. I just want to read it.
Yeah.
It's like, look,
But there's
I'm sad that I only have two middle fingers. I'm gonna wear these out. No, I totally get that. It's just, yes, I'm looking at it in a different way. It's like, just take a chance, be willing to get through it, you
yeah.
know. Um, no, I get it. I don't care if they don't like it. I just want them
That's where
to
I
read.
struggle with though at times.
Okay. Yeah, because I know going into it that not everyone's gonna like it.
Yeah. There
And
are
as
books
a,
that I don't like, and that's fine.
yeah,
Every book
we
isn't for everyone.
yeah, we like what you like.
Yeah.
And as writers, I can't write to an audience other than myself.
Yeah.
I have to make myself happy.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you want what you write to resonate with other people.
Yes.
Like now that I know I've got a pretty good group of people who like my cozy series, I'm trying to be mindful of the fact that they're reading it and they're invested in these characters. So I want to do a good job for them, but ultimately I have to do a good job for myself and hope that they like what I've written.
Yeah.
You can't know what they're going to like and what they're not going to like.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
that's the litmus test for me. Like, did
Yeah.
I like it?
Yep.
And it's surprising when other people enjoy it.
No, it's such a
You
nice
know,
feeling.
yeah. And with my last book, Death's Head, I wrote it in a month. That was my goal. I want to write this book in a month. It's just short. It's a pulp. It's like
Mhm.
45,000 words.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to get it done in a month. And I remember feeling good one day of the writing, like feeling really good. Like, I'm connected emotionally to this book. I felt something today. The rest of it is like, I'm understanding that my prose seems competent to a degree. Like, okay, I know I'm putting down things that sound good to me, but I
Mhm.
didn't have any, there was like nothing inside, which was a weird experience. So I had no idea what this was going to do.
Yeah.
And so I got some feedback from like beta readers, and like the only couple people who bought the book, because it hasn't sold for anything. And I got one like quick email like the next morning or even later that night, like saying, don't write the next cozy. you start working on the sequel to this because I need to know what happens. And I
Oh,
just thought that was like, oh my goodness, that was so nice and unexpected.
yep,
Like, because especially coming in feeling nothing,
yep.
like, oh, um, that was really surprising.
Yeah.
I mean, I liked writing the villain because the villain is just terrific. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, once that first line came out of his mouth, I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm not killing you off. We're gonna keep you going because you're just too much fun. Um,
That's how I kind of like that too with my main villain. There's even a part of me that kind of wants thinks about like when the series is done, I might go back and write a prequel about him and like what led him to where he is and why he is the way he is.
yeah,
It's fascinating.
because
Yeah.
he's not a villain in his own
Yeah.
story,
No, he's not.
right? The villain is always the hero in his
Yeah.
own or her own story.
Yep. Mhm. Yep.
Exactly. It's all a matter of perspective in that
Yeah.
regard. Yes.
Yeah. Mhm.
Well, can you talk about your current work in progress?
Yeah, so I'm working on the third book. It's in editing right now. So the series is the Mirrored Crown series. Book one is The Princess of the Rebellion, and book two, the sequel, is called The Crystal of Medora. And book three, I am not 100% sold on the title, so I'm not going to say it yet. I'm hoping it'll be out in May. I think that's going to be my timeline, is to have it out in May. And the series just it follows a 15-year-old girl named Lana. And one day while walking home from school, she is attacked by two men and she escapes. But in the process, she learns that her parents aren't her parents and she's a princess from another dimension. And her birth father, Aldrich, founded a rebellion against his father, the king. And after the king's murder, Lana was set into hiding. And so after she's attacked walking home from school, it's realized that the rebels found her. She'll be safer back in her birthplace. It's a city named Bridian, where the army can kind of protect her. And while she's in Bridian, she's adjusting to her new life as a princess while mourning her, her previous life, everything she knew, everything she thought she knew, her friends that she had to leave. And kind of while she's in Bridian, she learns the real reason why Aldrich and his rebels are so desperately searching for her. And I'll kind of leave that as like a dot, 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 right in
Nice.
why.
Okay, well that's intriguing. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
that's that's a good way to leave the ellipsis right there.
yeah. And the series
Nice.
kind of follows Lana and her story. Like I said, it's been with me for so long. I feel like
Mhm.
Lana is, with me all the time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. You can like dress up as her sometimes, for cosplay. Yes. That's what you should do when you go to do book shows. That would be
Oh
awesome.
gosh.
Just two more things. Is there anything else that you would like to promote while we are here?
No, I mean, really, right now, it's just, that main series. I do have other kind of ideas that kind of pop in and out of my head, but not there yet.
Okay, that's fine. And lastly, where can we find your books?
Oh, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, online, pretty much wherever books are sold. Yeah. The ebooks are on Kindle Unlimited right now. So yeah.
Nice.
First two books are out. Third will be out in May.
Excellent. Well, that's fantastic. That's good.
Yeah.
That's pretty soon. That's
Yeah.
about when this is going to show. May. Yeah.
Hey,
So it might be a good time coinciding with the release.
perfect. Buy the
Yeah.
third book.
And the first two, right? Yes. Exactly. Yeah, that's it. Yes, be supportive. Not
Yes.
like Mark's friends and family.
Oh
I had to do it. I love self-deprecating humor. I mean, come on.
no.
No one's gonna skewer me harder than myself, so that's good. Well, Jessica, I have had a really wonderful time getting to know you
Oh, this
today.
is fun.
Oh, good. I'm glad you came on, and this was really a great time learning about you and your writing process. And I hope your third book does smashing for you.
Thank you. I hope your stuff does very well too.
Thank you.
And your friends and family read it.
Yes, that's right. You tell him. That's right. Go read Mark's books for crying out loud. You're breaking his heart. Oh, I'm going to do my commercial, and then we'll get out of here.
Okay.
All right. Hey, you've been watching and listening to Between the Lines. You can find us at unsaneradio.com. Listen to full episodes or download to your device. You can watch us on our YouTube page, Between the Lines Podcast. That's where you're at right now. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you know someone who would like our show, tell them about us. And if you're a writer who'd like to join me for a chat, email me at betweenthelines54@yahoo.com, betweenthelines54@yahoo.com. And here's my cheesy outro. See you next time, Between the Lines. Yes. Thank you again. This was great.
This is fun. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.